I don't know everybody here. I'm John Daravec, retired Air Force physician assistant. I have the honor to introduce our speaker today. I was going to actually introduce Florida veterans to our speaker, but she's been sitting here listening to all this and is quite aware by now that we are very active in social issues and environmental issues. And that's the point for this evening, I think. Okay, so Dr. Terry Root was a professor at Stanford University. She's a biologist. Biology, of course, is a study of life, and the way biologists do that often is by picking a group or of some sort of organisms and learning how they live. In Terry's case, that was the birds. And she is now in her retirement on the governing board of National Audubon Society. I admire and appreciate Terry for her commitment to improving the health of our planet and people, and especially, I guess, in dealing with climate change. Terry was on the international panel of climate change back when they won the Nobel Prize. So you're going to hear from a Nobel laureate tonight, so be appreciative of that. She continues to learn about climate change, to lecture about climate change, and to advocate for solutions to climate change. So all that is great, and she'll tell you about it.
This is what I'm going to talk to you about today. First, I'm going to start with the climate change in the past, because we have to understand how climate really has changed in the past so we can understand what to expect in the future. Then I'm going to go into the future and what we can expect possibly for the future. Then I'm going to, since I'm a biologist, this is what I worry about, are the other living beings, and it is a problem. And I have to warn you, I'm going to go through this, you're going to get depressed. I'm going to go through this, you're going to get almost catatonic. I'm going to go through this, you're going to say, please stop, Terry, please stop, Terry, please stop, Terry. But then I'm going to come here, and I'm going to talk about what we can do. And that's the thing that is so important, is we have caused this problem. Woohoo, that's good. We've caused it, that means we can fix it. That's the good part about all of this. Okay, so let's go on now and talk a little bit about the climate and how it's changed since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. That's where I'm starting, basically. This is a plot that shows the change in temperature from the average of 1850 to 1900. And so it's basically the change that has happened since the Industrial Revolution. And you can see it's getting warmer. This is months around the edges this way. It's getting warmer, it's getting warmer. 2017, we don't have data past 2017 because some man in some crazy colored house won't allow the scientists to update this plot. But here we go, let me show you again. So it was colder in this time period. These are actual data. It's getting warmer. From 1975 on is when the plants and animals could really tell there was a difference. Look how warm it's gotten. So what I want you all to do for me today is I want you to make a pact with me. This is showing you that the globe is warming. Don't ever, ever, ever again say that you believe in global warming. It's not a belief, it's a fact. So say, the globe is warming, not I believe in global warming. Don't fall into their lexicon. It really is important, in my opinion. Okay, so what's happened? Here's Sarasota. From 1970 up to 2018, the summer nights, the average low temperature in the summer nights has warmed by 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Holy mackerel. That's a lot. That is a lot. Now, let me show you what's happened to our winter warming. Winter warming hasn't been as extreme. This again is for Sarasota. It's actually Sarasota County. So 2019, we have warmed by 2.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So you think it's getting warmer? It's getting warmer. As I was driving to the airport, I heard that Tampa had just broken a record. And the record was that now, in this past year, they've had 156 days where the temperature never got below 70 degrees during the day or night. It was always above 70 degrees. 156 days, 24-hour period. That's 5 months. No wonder we've been hot. Holy mackerel. Carbon dioxide, this is what's actually doing it. And on this axis is kind of a weird axis. Over here is now. So whatever you want to put now as, I put now as now. Now, this goes for years before now. This goes all the way out to 800,000 years ago. And on the y-axis is parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Now, look at 300 parts per million. It goes right along like this. It almost hits it there, but it didn't. And now we come along, and in 1910, we hit 300 parts per million. Then, holy mackerel, look at what has happened. Right now, I got this number 4 days ago. 2019, we are now at 408 parts per million. The thing is that carbon dioxide is a heat-absorbing gas, and it's holding in the heat. And I can talk to you more about how the physics behind all of that if you want me to. But what really is doing this is the carbon dioxide, plus also methane and nitrous oxides, and we'll talk about those too. But carbon dioxide is the big one. Now, people will say, Terry, okay, it's getting warmer, but come on, the planet has gotten warmer in the past. Yes, it has, but it hasn't gotten warmer as fast as it has been getting warmer lately all over the planet. It has happened faster in particular locations, but when you look at the entire planet, it hasn't ever gotten this warm this fast. Now, what we do in science is we compare a situation where you don't have change to a situation where you do have change. Well, we don't have two planets to be able to do that with. We have one planet that's changing. So how do we test all of this? Well, what you do is you have models. And we have about 12 different models out there. Several of them are very similar to each other, so they're not really independent. But we have about 6 to 7 independent models out there. And you put information into those models, and that's what I'm showing here. So on the x-axis is year. In almost all of my plots, the x-axis is going to be year. And on the y-axis is change in global temperature. And it's change from the 0 point here. You know, I don't know what the 0 point is. The 0 point must be somewhere in this area here. I honestly don't know what they've used as 0. But it's a change in temperature. It's not the absolute value. It's the change in temperature. Now, in those models, if you just put in the natural causes for warming, things like sunspots, things like the tilt of the Earth, so if the Earth is tilting like this, it makes a huge difference. Volcanoes, if you have a volcano that blows straight up into the atmosphere, that can cool everything because it puts all this dust in the stratosphere and it reflects back the sun. Mount St. Helens didn't work that way because it actually exploded sideways instead of up. But if you have one that explodes up, it really does cool the Earth. Anyway, if you put all those natural factors that are affecting the temperature of the planet into the models, and that's it, what you get is this green envelope here. I think you can see it here. And here it's working. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the black line is the actual temperature, temperature deviation. So here's what we're trying to track and see what's happening. So here's the natural, just the natural factors are in there, and it tracks somewhat, but then it comes over in here, and boom, it's not doing it at all. But if you put in human factors along with the natural factors, what you end up having is the purple envelope, and you can see how well it's actually tracking. So we really, really, really do understand the physics behind what's going on. And I'm happy to talk more with you about the physics that's happening. But this is telling us that humans are causing it. And as I said at the beginning, that is great, great news, because if we're doing it, we can stop it. And that's really super. Now, this plot right here, this red one, first again, this is years. This is CO2 in the atmosphere in Hawaii. And this is the Keeling Curve. And Dave Keeling went out to Hawaii and decided he was going to measure how much CO2 was in the atmosphere. Everybody thought he was absolutely bonker city. Well, it's fabulous, because now we understand what's going on with the climate, with the CO2 and climate. What you actually have is a sawtooth going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. When it is down, that's when you're having summertime. When it's up on the sawtooth, that's when you have wintertime. In the summertime, you have leaves on trees, and the trees are taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. Look at how much trees make a difference. It's amazing. So when people say we need to plant trees, oh my God, we need to plant trees. That's how we get CO2 out of the atmosphere. So anyway, what he has shown is it's going, by season, it's going up and down and up and down. This is in the northern hemisphere. And you can see it's going up and up and up and up and up. And this is an older plot. It stops at 2016, so it's not all, well, it's a little bit to 400. But the point is that if you have all of this CO2 up in the atmosphere, it's mixed up in the atmosphere rubs against the land, and it also rubs against the oceans. And when you're rubbing against the oceans, it's mixing what is in the atmosphere into the water. And what we have is this plot here, and what that is showing you is carbonic acid. You know the acid when you have Coca-Cola? What makes it bubble is carbonic acid. So it's the CO2 mixing in, it has carbonic acid. So we're getting higher and higher carbonic acid in the oceans. That is not good, because carbonic acid actually erodes calcium. So when you have clams, their shells are being eroded. When you have bony fishes, they don't have the ability to capture the calcium in the water and take it in. I used to live, well, I was at Stanford, and Tamales Bay has very famous oyster farms. What they would do would be they would grow baby oysters, and then they would seed the oyster beds. For 3 years, they got no oyster seeding, because it turns out that the pH had gotten so low that the shells on the tiny baby oysters were being eroded like that, and the oysters were dying. So now they have to actually grow the oysters until they're much bigger and have stronger shells on them before they seed them in order to collect them, and so we can eat them. So this is already happening. This is already affecting not just the shells, but also bony fishes. And when you change the calcium in the bony fishes, it's like us, if all of a sudden we didn't get any calcium, our bones start getting weak, and that's what's happening. There's actual change in behavior of fishes that they've recorded. So this is already happening. I love this plot because it's in zettajoules. I had no idea what a zettajoule was, but anyway, so I love it. I just have to show it. again, we have year here, and what this is doing is a change in the heat content of the oceans, and the average goes from 1981 to 2010. So from here to here is when they calculated the 0 mark. I don't really care about that. I like the zettajoules, but what it really is showing you is as the Earth is warming, the ocean is also warming. Now, when you warm water, the oxygen in the water decreases. So now you have fishes, it's hot for them, so they dive deeper down where it's cooler. But then they have this problem. The sun doesn't get down there as much, so there's not as much food for them down there. So they dive down there, they breathe, they hold their breath, they come back up, and they feed, and then they dive back down again. So the fishes are doing this all the time, and they are getting exhausted. The other thing that's happening, I'm a bird person, as John told you, there are birds like the Atlantic puffin, the ones that have the really pretty bills. They can't dive deeply enough anymore to catch the fish that they normally feed on, and the puffin abundance is plummeting. It's absolutely plummeting because the fishes are staying down too deep for them. So there's a domino effect, but we'll talk about that. Okay, so now you're a little bit depressed. Now I'll get you really depressed. Let's talk about the future climate change. And this, I have to say, could happen. I'm not going to say it will because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Before I get into that, I have to tell you about this. When I saw this, it just knocked my socks off. These are the 3 main greenhouse gases: methane, nitrous oxide, and carbon dioxide. Nitrous oxide comes out of our cars. Carbon dioxide comes out of our cars and other things too. Methane, you all know what methane is. The thing about methane is when it's up in the atmosphere, it degrades within about 10 years, which is really good because methane is about between 28 and 38% stronger greenhouse gas than CO2. If we had the amount of if the amount of methane in the atmosphere was equivalent to what we have for carbon dioxide, we'd be in real trouble. So methane degrades, thank God. Nitrous oxide, it takes 100 years to degrade, but it degrades, and there's not that much up there, so we don't really have to worry about it. This is the bugaboo. I have an electric car, so I can't say this anymore. I used to say, when I drove here tonight, the carbon dioxide that I put out in my car, if I had driven here in a fuel car, the carbon dioxide that I put out of my tailpipe would be in the atmosphere 1,000 years from now. So what we are doing right now, is affecting 40 generations in the future. That's great, 39 greats, grandchildren. What we are doing right now matters. It matters hugely. And the amount of CO2 that's up there right now was primarily put by Americans. Now, people will say, Terry, we have to worry about India. We have to worry about China. Yes, we do, absolutely. But what's up there right now was really done primarily by us. So we have got to do changes so that we stop putting CO2 into the atmosphere. Okay, this comes from the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. And again, on the x-axis is year. It goes from 2000 to 2100. And this is parts per million of CO2 equivalent. Equivalent means that they're also counting in methane and nitrous oxide, not just CO2. And they have storylines because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So the black one is business as usual. We don't change anything. And when Obama was in office, we actually changed in this line and actually dropped down. And now we have somebody else in that funny colored house, and we have actually gone above the line. We are actually above it than what it was that the IPCC put out. Now, these two lines, the blue and the green one, that means that we have a very egalitarian environment. So we have countries talking to each other and sharing information, and we're selling China current technology rather than 1940s technology. We're getting information out to different places so that they are getting the right kind of technology out there. The one that I'm concerned about is this red one right here. This one said, let's assume that in 2016, God clicked her fingers and stopped all CO2 from going into the atmosphere. 2016, no more CO2 into the atmosphere. Remember I told you it's up there for 1,000 years? That's what's going on. Look how long. It's not dropping very much. So what we did in 2016 is affecting us in 2100. So that's a tough one. That's a real tough one. How do we get the CO2 out of the atmosphere? One answer: trees. So you do not want people to cut down trees. That's very important. Okay, this is the same type of plot as I showed you before, but this is actually modeled data. It's not actual data, it's modeled data. And it fits very, very well as you watch it. Going out, it's getting warmer. And now it's going into the future. And this is assuming we're at business as usual. 2100, 5 degrees Celsius. Holy mackerel. We're not going to be able, Florida won't be here. Florida won't be here. It'll be underwater. It won't be here. So this, to me, is a very sobering plot, too. It really, we can't do this, folks. We absolutely can't go that high. We're going to lose too many species, and the suffering of humans is going to be immense. So let's not go there. Okay, now let's talk about this. This is in the past. Here is in the past. Days that the heat index, that's temperature and precipitation, is above 100 degrees Fahrenheit in Sarasota County. So the average from 1971 to 2000 was 38 days. If we have business as usual, then in 2036, not very far from now, to 2065, the average is going to be 131 days above 100. I might be a climate refugee if that happens. From 2070 to 2100, basically, there'll be 163 days. Now, if you change that into months, we had basically 1 month where it was hot. Now we're going to have 4. We could have 5. If we keep the temperature below 2 degrees C on average, and 2 degrees C is 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, it doesn't sound like much, but it's quite a bit when you're talking about an average, because you have a lot of highs and lows too. If we keep it below 2 degrees C, that's going to be good. We will only have 114 days, so only 3 months. We can survive that. Think of how hot it's been lately. We can survive that. But I'm not sure we could really survive that, especially with sea level rise. And I'll talk about that right now. So I have tried and tried and tried to get across what sea level rise means. And it is a really tough one because you have sea level rise and then you have storm surges. So if you have sea level rise and people say, oh, it's not very much, it's only going to be 8 inches, that's not much. But you put the 8 inches and then you have storm surge, it's huge. So this is what I've done. Again, I'm a bird person, so I thought, aha, I'll look at the American flamingo. So if you look at the American flamingo with its neck crooked like this, it's about 3 feet tall. Just give that to me, will you? Okay. In 2018, the sea level had increased by 8 inches already since 1880. Oh, I'm not telling you when to, I'm sorry. I was supposed to tell you when I'm switching gears. I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, so we've gone up by 8 inches in 2018. Now, what's going to happen by 2050? Well, whatever happens in 2050 is going to be built on this 8 inches that we've already had. The low estimate is 19 inches, so it would be 11 more inches between now and 2050. I think that's a joke. I think it's a joke. There's no way it's just going to be 11 inches. The high estimate by the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change is 31 inches by 2050. I think that's a joke too. You know why? Scientists don't know how ice melts. The thing is we have these huge ice sheets in Greenland and in Antarctica. And what's happening is they're melting on top and they're causing these great big huge ponds, for no other, I don't know what else to call them. And every now and then they break through and they drain down. We don't know if they're draining all the way down to the bedrock. And if they are draining all the way down to the bedrock, then they're acting as a skid and it allows the glacier to move faster. Or maybe they're just going down part way and refreezing. We really don't know. The indication is that they're doing the former. It's going all the way down to the bottom and it's causing a skidding. There is 25 feet of sea level rise just in the Greenland ice sheet. And we know that if it gets too warm, the Greenland ice sheet is going to pass a tipping point, and no matter how cold we get it again, it's going to melt completely off and then come back and reform. So we are going to have at least 25 feet. That's just in Greenland. Now, Antarctica, holy moly, there's lots and lots and lots of sea level rise there. The eastern part of Antarctica right now, they are really concerned about, and they think that we are going to lose this eastern area. And they think that there's 5 meters, which is about a little bit more than 15 feet of sea level rise right there. And that could happen in the next 20 years. So when I say the high estimate is 31 inches, I think it's really a medium estimate. I don't think we really know the high estimate. And in Florida, that's an issue. Now, I used to show plots of where the new sea level would be, and I found that people were looking for their house and saying, oh, I'm fine. Doesn't work that way. I would be fine. I live out by Sun and Fun on Fruitville, out on the other side of I-75. I'm not going to have the ocean right next to my house, but I'm also not going to have the infrastructure to support my life. I won't have the hospitals. I won't have mail post offices. I won't have grocery stores. I won't have a city council. That might be good. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. We've been fighting the city council and it's been a hard fight. But anyway, the point is, it's not just what's happening to your house, it's happening to the entire area. So we have the sea level rise. What's going to happen to these guys? Yeah, they're gone. They're gone because people are in their way. So as they're trying to back up and back up and back up away from this sea level rise, they run into people. So that's actually what I have been working on, and I tell you it's a very hard thing to work on, is I've been working on extinction, and that's what I'm talking about, is extinction. So we have, this is my one non-bird slide. So the IPCC in October in 2018, came out with a report that says, hey folks, we have to stay around 1.5 degrees Celsius, and that is 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And for sure, we do not want to go above 2. The reason we don't want to go above 2, there's several of them, but one of them is that we know that as we get warmer, the methane that is frozen in the permafrost around the edges of the oceans, and the clathrates, the methane that is frozen in the oceans, is going to start melting. And what we think, the scientists think, is that when we get to that point, they're going to melt like this. And we're going to have all this methane go up into the atmosphere, boom! And what they're saying is we could spike 4 to 6 degrees Celsius warming in 20 to 25 years. If that happens, the suffering, the trauma on our planet is going to be immense. So we do not want to go above 2 degrees. And what's magic about this report is they've come out and they've told us what we need to do to make sure we don't go much above 1.5. So we're going to try and do that. One of the things they said was this: we have to have big changes. They said that by the year 2030, 10 years from now, folks, in 10 years, we have to have the amount of CO2 emitted per year has to be 45% of what it was in 2010. How do we get the amount of CO2 dropped down? They came through and told us, and it is magic. Here's one: transportation sector. So what must we do? We have to have low emission vehicles. By 2020, we have to have 5% of our vehicles be low emission vehicles. We're there. Worldwide, we're there. Even in America, we're coming close. We're not quite at 5, we're about 3, but we're getting there. By 2050, we have to have about 50% of our vehicles be low emissions. Can we do that? Just like that. If we get the price of batteries down low enough, it'll switch very rapidly. It's actually a lot of fun to be a gray-haired lady driving an electric car, and one of these hotshot kids come up at a stoplight with me, and he goes, vroom, 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 vroom. And the light turns, and I just go, and I am off and away. Woohoo! My husband hates it, but I love it. Anyway, an advantage of an electric car. Okay, our non-biomass renewables, which is wind turbines, solar, geothermal, water, whatever that's called, hydro, and nuclear. And if you told me when I was demonstrating against nuclear that I would be saying this today, I would tell you were crazy. We cannot take nuclear off the table. But what we have to do is for our electricity, the percent of the market that is non-biomass renewables by 2030, 10 years from now, has to be about 55%. I showed this slide at I gave a talk at the American Wind and Wildlife Institute. Half of the people were from NGOs that were trying to save animals, and half the people were from the industry trying to put up windmills or wind turbines. I put this slide up, I said something, and the entire audience, there's about 400 people there, started laughing. I said, wait, this isn't a joke slide. And thank heaven, a man in the back stood up and said, Terry, that's impossible in the US. Let's hope it's not impossible in the world, but in the US, we can't do that. The fossil fuel industry has such a stranglehold that we just can't get that done here. We can't get it done. And we're trying very hard. I've been on the Audubon board of directors for 9 years now.
And Audubon is very strongly behind turbines, very strongly. And people will say, no, 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 turbines kill birds. Turbines do kill bigger birds, but they figured out how to stop that, so that's not doing that. Now let's talk about the littler birds, this down to here, this size. The average, 3.5 birds killed per turbine per year. Per year. You know what kills birds? Cats. Ha! Cats do it. So I told the Audubon Society we need to take on cats, and they fired me. So this is huge. We have 80 million domestic cats in the U.S. We have 80 million feral cats in the U.S. If you have a cat, that's wonderful. Don't let it outside. It's better for the cat. It's better for the world. If you have to let it outside, I have a friend of mine, and we are very close, and I could just smash her because she just insists on letting her cat out. I said, okay, only let it out during the day, not at night, because the birds are awake. Anyway, so here's turbines down here. 234,000 compared to 2.4 billion. So turbines, it's propaganda from the oil and gas company about killing birds. It doesn't happen. Electrocution, towers, power, running into power lines, automobiles hitting them, windows. There's new technology on windows now. If you get a window, every 4 inches is a stripe that is in the ultraviolet realm. The birds can see those stripes. We can't. They don't run into windows anymore. So the next time you have to put in a new window, get one of those windows. I know it's a pain, but it's worth it. Okay, other living beings. Let's talk about other living beings for a bit. This is a slide that was I took a long, long time ago. This is ice, polar bear, water, killed a seal. That's how life used to be. It would kill the seal, and it would literally fling blood and guts all over the place, literally. And then this little guy, the ivory gull, that's the reason I took the slide, was to see the ivory gull, would eat that blood and guts that got thrown all over the place. No ice, no polar bears out on it. So it's good for seals. Seals like it. But this guy is plummeting in abundance. The trouble with that is I will bet, unless I get hit by a car tomorrow, which I hope I won't be, I will bet you $1 million right now that this bird right here, the ivory gull, will be extinct before I die. And I'm 65 years old. It's plummeting in abundance. The point of this is that if you change one thing, one species, other species get affected. And we really have to understand this domino effect. Now, there was a study that just came out that said if we look at our 12 billion birds that occurred on our planet in 1970, this is individual birds, counting individual. There's Pam, there's Sam, there's Fred, they're individual birds. We had about 12 billion individual birds. Since 1970, 1 out of 4 of those birds, 1/4 of those birds are gone. It is not due to climate change. It has to do with cats, and it has to do with habitat destruction. But you put on top of this destruction climate change, and now we really have to worry. So here we have lost 3 billion in that time period. 3 billion, that's on my watch. And I'm a bird person, and I worked on birds. That's very sobering to me. That's a tough one. We don't know how to get them back. Now, the Audubon Society, that was past, looking in the past. Audubon Society now is looking in the future, and they have just done this fabulous, fabulous study. They looked at over 140 million observations of birds from Alaska all the way down to the Yucatan Peninsula. and try to figure out what was actually could happen to birds as we warm. What they did was they looked at the climate. They looked at the climate in the projections of the climates from the Ipcc reports. They took into account vegetation and how vegetation is changing. You can grow things in Florida now that you didn't, or in Sarasota now that you couldn't used to because it was too cold. It's now warmer. Things are moving up. So vegetation is changing. They took that into account. They took into account change in land use. As we get more and more people, we have to have more and more property to grow agriculture. So that was taken into account. Our cities, as we get more people, the cities are taking over a larger portion of the habitat. And then you have specific variables. So for water birds, this is one of the variables that they used. They looked at ponds, lakes, and streams. And they did this whole thing at 1 kilometer square resolution. So you can actually go on the website, put in your zip code, and it will tell you what's going to happen. And this is what you'll find. This, I don't know why they use this color. I apologize. It's not me. This is for the wood thrush. The current range, can you see this at all? Yeah. Okay. Well, this is where its range is. And what they did was they used that range, and they used those various parameters and modeled what was actually shaping this range. And then they assumed that there was going to be 3 degrees of warming. And what they found is this red area means that it is no longer hospitable for the wood thrush. So the wood thrush will no longer be in this area, this dark red area. It will move into this area up here if there's habitat. But then what they also did was not just look at 3 degrees, they also looked at the magic 1.5. This is what we want to do. We don't want to go to 3 degrees. Look, look. It's not nearly as draconian. So we can do that. We can do that. We need to do that. We need to do that for the species. We need to do that for other humans. Now, this is a screwy plot. Down on this axis is years, I'm always saying. On this axis is date index. What this is a compilation of studies done in America, and actually in Mexico also, in Australia, Asia, and Europe. And what they did was they wanted to see what was happening in the spring. Are things happening earlier in the spring? And so the spring in Australia is when our fall is. So they couldn't actually put a date here, so they put a date index. And they assumed that in whatever this is, 59 maybe, 1960, whatever that is, they assumed that that was 0. They just set them all at 0 and said, now, how is it changing? And you can see that all the things are coming earlier and earlier and earlier in the spring. There seems to be a plateau here. It'll be interesting to see if that stays that way. I don't know. But things are happening earlier. I did a study in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and I found that things were happening about 3 weeks earlier up in Michigan. So that's what they're finding here, is it's coming earlier and earlier and earlier. So species are changing. They've changed for millennia. They're changing. The other thing that's happening is they're changing their ranges. Fishes are going deeper because it's cooler, and the things on the land are going up in elevation where it's cooler, or going toward the poles where it's cooler. So this is a study that was done by a colleague of mine, John Terborg, in Peru in 1985. And he found that the common scale-backed antbird went up to about 800 meters on this mountain in Peru. The versicolored barbet went up to here, and the variable antshrike was up at the top. Well, he took such good notes that some of his students went back and redid this study. 2017, the common scale-backed antbird has moved up here. The versicolored barbet has moved up here. Where's that guy gone? Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Gone. It's not extinct because it's on other mountains, but in this location, it became extinct. The other thing we have to understand is when you're talking about species moving, they've done it a long time, but they didn't have things like the New Jersey Turnpike in the way. They didn't have cities in the way. So I wouldn't want to be a land tortoise that needs to go up here where it's cooler and cross the New Jersey Turnpike. So now what's going to happen is humans are going to have to figure out which species they're going to save and which species they're going to let go extinct. I don't want that job of playing God. That's a tough one. We need to know enough biology behind them. We have to have the people power. We have to have the political power. We have to have money to do it. You know, all these things. It'd be so much easier just not to go warmer. So it's trying to get across, and it can't. So that brings me to extinction. This is the golden toad in Costa Rica, and it is the first species to be actually recorded to go extinct due to climate change. And the fog lifted on the mountain, and the toad ended up going extinct. It no longer is in the wild. Now, everything goes extinct, and for biologists, what we do is we say the background extinction rate is less than one species in 1,000 species over 1,000 years. So if you put 1,000 species in this room and you watched them for 1,000 years, less than one of them would go extinct. Let me show you what the extinction rate is today. The current extinction rate is about one species in 10 species, not 1,000 species, over 100 years, not 1,000 years. So if you put 10 species in this room, not 1,000, 10, and you watch them for 100 years, not 1,000 years, 100 years, one will go extinct. So I used to say we were right at the edge of the 6th mass extinction event. That's not true. We're in the 6th mass extinction event. Species are going extinct right and left. Now the Ipcc, this is the 4th assessment report. This is the one that won the award with Al Gore. And what we said was, this is some of my work, that if we go up 2 degrees C, which is 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, above natural, or above industrial revolution, the industrial revolution time, we will lose about 1/4 of the species on the planet, 500,000 species. We know 2 million species. We know the names of 2 million species, so that's the ones that we're worried about. Actually, on the planet is probably more like 10 million, but we don't know the other 8 million, so we can't talk about them. I'm only talking about the 2 million species. So if we go up 2 degrees C, we could lose 1/4 of the species. If, and I really hope it's an if, not a when, we go up 4 degrees C, which is 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit above natural, we could lose half the species on the planet. And folks, we're going there. We're going there. This is what I've been working on, is extinction. Okay, now everybody is really in the doldrums, and you're saying, Terry, shut up, I don't want to hear anymore. You do, because there are things that we can do. The main thing that we can do is have a paradigm shift. We have to have a paradigm shift. And we have had paradigm shifts before. Here's one. Blow on her face and she'll follow you anywhere. Okay. Okay, men, I'm not talking to you. Okay, all the women, if somebody blew in your face, wouldn't you smash them? Yeah. So this is showing 2 paradigm shifts. We've stopped smoking, and we've had, hey baby, we've come a long way, right? We've had 2 paradigm shifts in our lifetimes. We can have a paradigm shift. It'll work. And I truly believe that we're right at the beginning of a paradigm shift. I really, truly believe it's happening. This is what we need. Now, this is the most hopeful slide I will show you. It no longer has year down here, it has location. And on this axis is tons of CO2 emitted per person. And this is in 2014. There are no newer data than this. I apologize, but that's what we have. The world is down low because there are a lot of people in this world that don't emit much CO2. So it's very low. Now let's look at the US. It's over here. It's higher, but look at these two states. Woohoo! They know what to do to decrease the CO2 put out by people. I used to live in California, and I used to say, Californians have never met a regulation they didn't love. That's truly, I do believe that with California. California regulates, and it really works. It really, truly works. Florida is doing the right thing. I have a lot of trouble with FPL, but we can talk about that later. And then we have these two crazy states over here. Texas has never met a regulation it liked, right? Now, what's going on with Wyoming? In 2014, it no longer is like this, but in 2014, they got 100% of their electricity in coal. Exactly. Plus that, there's not a whole lot of people in Wyoming. So anyway, that's why it's higher. It's lower now because they're getting, they're not using 100% coal. But the point is that these guys know what to do. There's other places in the world that know what to do. We just have to do it. We just have to have that paradigm shift, and we can do it. The thing we need to do is talk to our friends. All of us know people who are on the fence or who are naysayers. What I want you to do is invite them to dinner one night. And what you do is you feed a nice dinner, you don't talk about any of this, and then you say, we're going to watch a movie. We're going to watch Chasing Ice. You can stream it on Netflix, and it is a fabulous movie. It watches ice melt. It sounds really boring, but it is really very good. I actually happened to be in this movie, and when it first came out, they sent me around to various places where it was premiering, and I would watch and listen to the people going in, and I would watch the people who said, oh, I'm just going to laugh my head all the way through this because this is all such a bunch of bunk. And I would remember what they had on. And then they would come back out. Inevitably, those people that I remembered would be saying, oh my God, I didn't think it was true. So you don't have to say anything. Let the film say it. Here in Florida, there's a sequel to this called Chasing Coral. You can also get it on Netflix. Oh my God, it is gorgeous. But it's talking about the warming of the oceans, sea level rise, and the pH change. And it's pretty bleak. But anyway, it's a fabulous movie. Chasing Ice, Chasing Coral. The director of both of them was a student of mine at Stanford, so I'm very proud of him. The other thing that we can do is we can plant native plants. Now that sounds really, really dumb. How is planting native plants going to help? We had 2 butterflies in 1995 in the Baja Peninsula, and they were moving up and up and up because it was getting hotter. They ran into Tijuana, then into San Diego, and they went extinct because they couldn't get across the cities. They couldn't find food to go across the cities. If there had been yards that had native plants, they could have. So these species are moving. Give them everything you possibly can. I took out my front yard. My husband was thrilled. He didn't have to mow it anymore. Woohoo! And we actually have green anoles back in our front yard. We had 12 different species of butterflies. It's a really exciting place to go. It really is fun. And all you do is you go to audubon.org/native-plants. You put in your zip code. You don't have to put, they want your email, but you don't have to put it in. Put in your zip code, and it'll tell you the kind of plants to plant. You take that list, I go to a native plant store because I go to Home Depot and they look at me and they laugh. So you go to native plant stores, and there's a lot of them around here. I can talk about that too. And all you do is plant them. Even if you just plant one, it'll make a difference. Never, ever, please, never, ever plant another invasive plant. Plant a native plant. They're fabulous. The other thing is we all drink coffee. We need to be drinking shade-grown coffee, because what they're doing is they're going down in the tropics and cutting down trees. Remember I said we needed trees? Coffee grows underneath these trees, so it's called shade-grown coffee. Drink shade-grown coffee. It's hard to find. They have it at Trader Joe's. They have it other places too, but you can look for shade-grown coffee, and it makes a difference to the planet. It also makes a difference to the migrants that are going down there too. So the greenhouse gas sources, we have electricity is 28%, transportation 28%, agriculture 9%, commercial and residential 11%, 22% for industry. What needs to be done in each of these locations? For electricity, renewables. Easy, renewables. Transportation, electric vehicles. Easy, electric vehicles. Agriculture, we need to be having plant-based diets. I know, don't groan, but we really do need to have plant-based diets. Commercial and residential, zero emission buildings. We should never, ever, 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 ever build any more buildings that are not zero emission. We can do it, we just have to do it. We have to have the will to do it. So we need to be talking to the developers, something I hate doing, and telling them that we need to have zero emission buildings. Industry, that's a tough one because we have the cement people, we have steel. How do we deal with that? I don't know. So I put down here research and development. So now, what should all of us in this room do? Every single one of us can do these things. Support wind farms. They're going to stop extinctions. We've got to have wind farms. Install solar panels. If you have an HOA, they cannot tell you that you can't put solar panels on in Florida, okay? Put solar panels on if you can. Come up to me and talk to me how you do it. You can do it for what you're paying right now, I promise, because I've done it. Buy Energy Star when you buy an appliance. When you go out and buy a refrigerator, make sure it's Energy Star. You can do that. It's hard. The sales reps hate it. I go to Home Depot and I said, what's the Energy Star? And they go, oh, I got to go look it up. I said, yeah, you do. You got to go look it up. If any of you have incandescent light bulbs, put them in the landfill. I don't say that easily, but incandescent light bulbs are horrible. I had incandescent light bulbs that were secret because they were my Christmas tree lights, right? So get rid of your Christmas tree lights and get new Christmas tree lights. Your very next car should be a plug-in car. All of us can do that. You don't have to have completely electric. It really is fun, I have to admit. But you can have a plug-in car that goes gas and electric. That's fine. Make fewer trips. We all can do that. We all can do that. Agriculture. When I was a kid, my grandmother was a Roman Catholic, and she always had fish on Fridays. I hated going to my grandmother's house on Fridays. Meatless Mondays. We can all do that. Don't eat meat on Monday. And I put a plus after that to say, and Thursday, and maybe Sunday, but you can do that. Commercial, get an energy audit. FPL gives energy audits. John, I bet, I don't remember your electric company, but I bet they do energy audits. I'm sure they do. They'll tell you what you have to change in order to make your house more energy efficient. Insulate the walls, the roof, the floor, la la da da. When you get a bad window, a bad door, replace it with a good one, not a crummy one, not one that matches. My husband had a fit when I said we had to replace this one window with something different. And now we don't even notice the difference. Now, what do you do with industry? Again, I don't know. You support carbon capture and sequestration. That's a tough one. Support planting trees. I'll give you another Christmas idea. Go to this place called cooleffect.org and you type in your lifestyle and it will tell you how many trees need to be planted to counterbalance the CO2 that you're putting into the atmosphere. So now what I do for all the adults on my Christmas list is I go to cooleffect.org. I've done a lot of research, and this is one that does native trees. That's why I like it. Cooleffect.org, and I say, okay, my brother, all I do is I pay, I don't remember, $81 or something like that, and it takes care of the CO2 that he puts out into the atmosphere. And I give it to him for Christmas. He knows I'm crazy, but anyway, this is the kind of stuff we can do. I bet all of us remember when that was taken. Look how fragile our world is. It's very fragile, and it's the only one we've got. We got to take care of it. We can take care of it. We're going to have a paradigm shift. We're going to beat this thing. I promise you, we just have to do it. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it.